Welcome one and all to yet another Kings of War battle report. The Abyssal Dwarfs versus Ogres. Extra spicy, extra hot, extra sizzling. Abyssal Dwarfs in action. The first time from the comfort of my own home as well, with a battle mat that definitely suits their appearance, as you will see very shortly. But first of all, to guide you through this perilous journey into the ashy, lava-infested wasteland, here I am in the corner of your screen right now. And as we look at image 1 from this battle report, you can see that some of the Abyssal Dwarf units actually blend in quite nicely with this table. The same can't be said for some of the terrain, because I haven't got around to making my lava-themed hills and burnt-up trees yet, and various other things that I'm thinking of doing in the very near future. So you'll just have to deal with these luscious green hills that are sprouting, showing that there's still a bit of hope in this wasteland. Something can still flourish out there, a little bit of grass before it gets scorched. Now, Abyssal Dwarves versus Ogres, it's the loot scenario, 2,000 points, and you can see the 3 tokens immediately, and if we bring on the magic arrow of doom, then you can see all of them. So there's one right here, one there, and there is one there. So that's obviously led to most of the forces being in this whole region here, where there are 2 big juicy tokens, and the house blocking there means that slightly less forces are deployed on that side. There's still the entire other half of the table down there, so you'll see what's over there in a moment. Let's dive into the pictures here. So there are the tokens on the center line. Of course, if you're not familiar with loot, the object of the game is to pick up the tokens and hold onto them. So for the ogres, on the right flank, as I look at it, there is a horde of ogre boomers, and they have the blessing of the gods. Then there is an ogre boomer sergeant next to them, so lots of breath attacks over here. Then we've got some tortured souls, the abyssal allies. There is a horde of ogre warriors, and I think these ones have the brew of courage. There is Grok, who is turned sideways just because he can't actually fit properly in there, so he's not actually facing that way. Then there is Grok's finest braves. There is Nomogrok, and there is a standard bearer, and I think he might have the banner of the griffin. So moving on, there are a horde of ogre shooters there, and an archfiend of the abyss to provide a bit of speed and flying support along with the tortured souls. Now, there's that side of the army. Now, all the way over here, right on this flank, we've got my Abyssal Dwarf gargoyles, who are not in a really threatening position at the moment. And we have Basuzin right here. And when we go to a wide shot in a moment, then I'll show you the thinking behind some of these positions, but this is more to go through the list. We've got the Abyssal Dwarf heavy mortar there, which is represented by a golem with a puff of smoke coming out of his belly, because my actual mortar, I've actually got it right here on my desk being assembled right now, so hopefully that'll be ready soon. Then, moving down into the meat of the army, we've got this big wall of unwaverable rock and metal here, essentially. We've got Immortal Guard, and there's 2 regiments of Immortal Guard, but one of them is over on the right flank over here somewhere. I believe this one is the one that has an artifact, which would be the Blade of Slashing. We've got Infernok. We've got 2 hordes of Lesser Obsidian Golems. The one here has the Orcish Skull Pole, and this one has the Blessing of the Gods, so they're elite. We've got 2 Dragonfire teams behind them. We've got Dravok, the legendary Ironcaster. We've got a regiment of half-breeds, freshly painted, just in time for this game. In fact, they were being drilled and pinned to their bases just before the game began. They weren't actually stuck on by that point. Then we've got Brekkie, with his huge inspiring range and his speed to help out there. And we've got the other regiment of Immortal Guard there. So my entire front line, there's 5 big juicy units there to do the fighting, and none of them can be wavered. They've all got nice defense as well. So let's go back to the wide shot, and I'll tell you my strategic thinking here, so you can take a voyage inside my mind, as perilous as that may be. So you can see, I would like to get the first turn here, because the gargoyles, who are all the way over on this flank, would go straight forward, land somewhere around there outside of his charge arc, which they can do with their position, and just stare at his flank. And then as the game goes on, they can work their way in and look for flanks on other enemy units, because there isn't much shooting that can deal with them. All the breath attacks are over on this side, and the shooters don't want to turn around to target gargoyles. That would be bad for them. And what Susan would like to do, ideally, is get the first turn and just move straight up into the woods, asking the Archfiend, would you like to charge me? If you do, you're going to be hindered, so you're probably not going to kill me. Very unlikely that you'd kill Susan in one round. And I'm going to have positioned some Immortal Guard and some half-breeds down here somewhere who could then charge in and attack the Archfiend after that. Because depending on how I position them, I would be able to get multiple units in there, and Susan could always try and escape, because even if she's grounded after taking damage, she can still get out of the way. So that would tie up that terrible threat there. And then these three big meaty rock units here are just going to go straight forward, try and crunch the enemy, and we'll see what the mortar can do on the way in, see if we can perhaps do some damage to one of those units. And I'm not going to move these forward in a straight line, because I don't want to take multi-charges, because there's Grok, there's the Braves, there's the Ogre Warriors. Those are the three main fighter units, and I don't want to be charged by all three of them on a single unit. I wouldn't even like to face two of them, really, but sometimes you have to accept that, especially when one of them's Grok, because he's got such a small base. And then I've got my other little pesky units here just behind to make sure they don't get shot. And Bracky is going to be heading forward pretty rapidly, though, because if someone wants to charge him, I'll try and put him in such a position that the enemy can't get a multi-charge on him, because he's another one, like Susan, pretty tough to kill from a single unit. You could waver him, but then I've got the other units behind here, because all my opponent's units are faster than mine, pretty much, apart from my cavalry and the flyers. So I would like to be able to lure them out into my charge range, and Bracky could be the one to do that. And you can see that this unit of Immortal Guard here are just going to be moving straight towards that token. I expect them to lose, though, because they're coming up against Boomers and a Boomer Sergeant over there. So there's the pre-match strategy. The middle two tokens kind of speaks for itself, that tactic, because everything's just going to be moving forward. And whatever I don't want to surge is going to be picking up a token, basically, because you can't surge a unit that's carrying a loot token. And nothing that I'm going to pick up a token with can be slowed down either, because they're already slow. Whereas the Ogres are made a little bit slower when they pick something up. So turn one, and I do not get the first turn, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to modify my strategy a bit. I like to go and deploy aggressively with the intention of getting the first turn with this army, because I want to get right up there as fast as possible and take as little shooting as possible from things like Ogre Shooters. This list doesn't have a huge amount, and it has some breath attacks as well, so it's not as big of a deal in this game, but with the flyer positioning it could be. So they've moved up a bit, but the only unit that's put themselves in range of Bracky are the Tortured Souls here. And whether they did that intentionally, I'm not sure. And the shooters obviously haven't moved. And Grok is actually a bit further forward than that, but he wouldn't stay put in that position, so he's actually about an inch further forward. He's slightly behind the rest of the units, though. And this here is just propping up the warriors on the hill. Down here you can see the Archfiend being positioned. So it's being outside of the shooting arc of the mortar, which is slightly annoying. I've got the mortar out of sight of the Ogre Shooters, by the way. That's why it's positioned in such a way with the trees here. But he's been able to get the Archfiend outside of its view. So maybe I could have had it turned to face this way a bit more. But it's not going to be able to escape from Basusu. But if Susan does want to charge in there, she will be hindered, because she'll be landing in the difficult terrain there of the forest. And it's out of sight of the gargoyles at the moment as well. So I'm going to have a choice here of whether to send Basusan right in there to attack, or totally ignore the Archfiend and allow it to just eat the mortar next turn and then deal with it. So we'll see what I prioritise momentarily. So there's how the battle line is looking. And if I move out the way as well, you can see the Boomer little detachment up there, which is going to come up shortly. And the shooters, what do? Well, they do 3 damage to the horde of lesser obsidian golems there, which is okay because I've got Dravok back there with heal, so I'm not too concerned about that. That does mean, however, if I'm going to be healing units, I can't also surge them because I've only got one surge caster one Ironcaster in this list, because I think 2 is a bit excessive when I'm also taking Basusan and Bracky. That's a lot of points on individuals. So turn 1 for the Abyssal Dwarfs, and these Immortal Guard have just moved straight up towards that token. They're going to get breath next turn, no doubt, but we might as well go for them. They're really there to tie up that flank, because the Regiment of Immortal Guard are cheaper than the Boomer Horde and the Boomer Sergeant. So if I can just tie them up for a few turns, a couple of turns maybe, I could probably survive a round of breath, then maybe charge them if they want to come forward. Oop, don't do that. Charge them if they want to come forward onto the token. If they don't, I'll just jump on the token and then just keep moving towards them, see how long I can survive. Keeps them nice and tied up though, and the main battle line is here, because these 2 tokens, if I can take them, then I'm going to win regardless of what happens over on the right. So I've just pushed everything up as fast as it'll go, which isn't very fast, and then I've healed all the wounds with Dravik back there, so no wounds on my units now. And the half-breeds are behind. I was in 2 minds about whether to put them on the front line or not, but they would be the juiciest target ever for the Ogre shooters, because they'd be wounding them on 2s, and they can be wavered as well. So I did not want them on the front lines against Ogre shooters, so I'd rather keep them as backup, and then if anything breaks through my lines, they're really good on the charge then to counter in there. They'd be keeping their Thunderous as well. So we'll see if that works out. I've seen occasionally you'll see someone put cavalry behind their lines and they end up getting stuck there for the whole game. I've even done it if you've seen any of my rewarded battle reports where I've taken allied Soul Reaver cavalry. Occasionally they can get tied up behind there, but while they're alive, even if they're not fighting, they're always a threat. So there's things to consider on both sides there, I would say. And Bracky does charge straight into the Tortured Souls, does 5 damage, which is pretty tasty for him. He doesn't have quite as many attacks as Basusan, so he isn't able to kill them, but he is stopping them flying, which is important. We don't want anyone dancing around us. And especially dancing around wouldn't be that much of an issue with Surge, but I've only got 1 Surge caster, and there's the Archfiend as well that I have to worry about. So if he wants to land behind my lines, he's got something to be concerned with as well. Gargoyles just move up onto the hill, and they are still out of the shooters' shooting arc, and I think Basusan probably is as well. I decide that she's just going to ignore the Archfiend and allow the Mortar to get eaten. So the Mortar's going to get eaten, the Archfiend is going to turn and look at the rear of my army, but I'm confident at this point that I can be moving out of its charge range, so I would get another turn to then continue about my business without the Archfiend bothering me, which I'm quite happy with at the moment. And that leaves Basusan in a position to charge the flank of the shooters if they don't turn. And charging into the flank isn't that big of a deal, because obviously she's not going to multiply attacks. But if I can get these gargoyles into someone's flank, that would be a big deal. Because of course, just going straight in the front, they don't do too much damage. But the main reason that Susan is in their flank is so that she's not getting shot next turn. And you can see there, look, I've even taken a picture of the template down there, so you can see avoiding. Very nice. And the Mortar, what does it do? It's only going to shoot this 1 turn probably and then get killed. So, does it hit? And yes, it does. And it does 7 damage to Grokagumok and wavers him, which is very, very good, because I think I have got some of my units to within charge range possibly at the moment. So that means there's going to be 0 chance of a multi-charge from Grokagumok and somebody else. And if you look at my battle line here, one of my units of lesser golems is slightly further back than the others, because this is the only one that is within charge range of both of these units, but they won't actually fit. So one of them would have to charge in here, or one of them into Infernoc, one of them in here. So I'm just making sure they can't double charge. Now, had Grokagumok not been hit by the Mortar, he could have joined in for a double charge on that unit, but I would have accepted that. I've got backup. Got all my breath weapons, I've got the half-breeds back here, and if anyone wants to surge the middle unit, they're just asking to be flanked as well by my golems and Infernoc, because they would have to turn away, which means they'll be turning away from one of the others. So there's potential for some rear charges and everything. So I would have liked, potentially, had he been alive and not wavered, Grokagumok, I wouldn't have minded a couple of units charging in there, even if they get the kill. So, what do I anticipate happening now? Well, the Archfiend has got a choice. Does he kill the Mortar and then turn to face the back of my army? Or does it just jump around here somewhere and risk me surging into it? Let's see. So turn 2, and it does go straight for the mortar. Probably the wise choice, because that thing's already proven its worth by wavering Grok with a single hit. And the Abyssal Dwarf mortar is just an absolute beast with the amount of damage it can put out. It's the vicious that really does it, and the amount of guaranteed hits it does once it actually lands, with it being +4. So minimum 5 hits. And of course, with it being vicious, unless you target something really high defense, then generally you're wounding on 2s with vicious. So you're going to be doing near enough full damage. So between 5 and 10 wounds when it hits. So very, very nice. And everything else, they actually stand off a bit, which I'm not sure whether I'm surprised, because with Grok being wavered, the chances of them actually killing anything were minimal, and they then would have been flanked by everything under the sun. So I think that waver on Grok has forced my opponent to reconsider his position now, and think, you know what, I've got the Archfiend back there behind their lines. I'll kill the mortar, turn around, and then kind of get them in a sandwich position. So they're going to have to come forwards towards us. It's probably what he's thinking. But yeah, it's a tricky situation. You can't just send in a small number of units into this wall of surgeable things, because there's just so many flank options that are going to open up. And the Tortured Souls have gone back into Bracky there. And over here you can see that some healing has taken place. I think Nomagorok has got, is it heal 5 or something? Gets a wound back on the Grokster. My plan, though, is because he's not been healed that much, Bracky actually thinks he's got a decent chance of killing, or at the very least wavering again, Grok next turn. So what he wants to do is just survive this round of combat against the Tortured Souls, then charge off into him next turn, which would allow this unit of golems to charge into the Tortured Souls and finish them off. Fighting over there. He may even kill Grok as a result of that, because he's already on 6 wounds now. Bracky could easily do another 5 to him, so that would put him pretty close to death's door there. It wouldn't take a ridiculous amount of luck to kill him. And moving on, so the shooters, what do they do this time? They rack up some more damage on the same unit they targeted last time, another 5, so that means if I want to surge anyone next time, I can't heal them. And the Archfiend, of course, kills the Mortar. It would have been funny if there was a double 1 there, but alas. The Mortar's done its job, though, done some damage on the Grokster, and it's got the Archfiend out of harm's way back there. Because at this point, I've actually measured slightly imprecisely. I thought the positioning of the Mortar meant that if it was attacked by the Archfiend, I would be able to move away from it with all these units and get out of its charge range, but you'll see that that is actually incorrect momentarily. So you can see here that the Tortured Souls have an incredible performance now. 4 damage onto Bracky, and then they waver him. Wow. So it doesn't affect my plan too much, because he can get out the way and turn sideways, but he can't attack the Grokster now. So that part of the plan is kaput. So look at that, a waver. So what I'm actually going to attempt in my turn now is he's going to turn sideways and move far enough away so that this unit of golems can fit into the Tortured Souls, but he's not going to go so far as to prevent this unit from moving forward, because what I want to do is move them forward 5 inches to about there, and then use Mr. Dravek to surge them as far as he can, because they would need a surge of 7 inches to reach the warriors on the hill. And he's got surge 10 with elite, so it's not out of the question at all that he could pull that off. I think the odds are minimally against it, but I think it's worth the risk, because even if they fail and they're stuck in no man's land, the worst that's going to happen is they get multi-charged and killed, but then all my units have come into play then. So there's going to be charges opened up for me. This unit are undoubtedly going to kill the Tortured Souls. They could turn to face that way. So how many units would my opponent send into this unit of golems, because they're already on 5 damage? So I think just getting the fight started, regardless of whether this unit dies, is a good idea. And the Gargoyles and Basusu are going to get into the game as well now. So turn 2 for the Abyssal Dwarves. And the Immortal Guard charge up into these guys. Did I even mention them previously? Was there even a picture of them? I suppose, look at this here. So with all those breath attacks, they get them up to 6 wounds, which is fairly average. I think it's not too ridiculously poor. And not enough though. So they now charge into this unit of boomers, and the reason they've both moved up is because they want to pick up this token. And I'm not sure whether that was the best move, because they could have quite happily just stayed where they were or shuffled backwards a tiny bit and continued shooting the Immortal Guard until they were dead and then gone for the token afterwards. But they've engaged in this fight now. So that means that the Immortal Guard are able to get in there and hit them because they went in to go for the token. And also, the way this guy's positioned, when they bounce off an inch, the Immortal Guard, he is actually not in their flank. So that could have easily been set up so he was in the flank. He just needed to be tilted a little bit more this way, a tiny fraction more. When we got the laser out and worked it out, I was very pleased with that. Over here you can see that the Archfiend has actually been taken off his base at the moment, but he's still there. One of my Dragonfire teams is in range to go and give him a light toasting. I thought maybe I could get lucky and waver him. 5 damage, so that's a good start. And the Gargoyles have positioned themselves here, which is outside the charge arc of the shooters, and they're staring right at the side or the back of the enemy lines now. So next turn they may be able to get a charge. And Basusan has gone into the flank of the shooters and done 6 wounds, which is very good going for her. But she is a beast, 8 attacks, which is very, very handy for a flying individual. Normally when you have individuals, they lack the number of attacks to really threaten the tough units. But characters like Basusan, hitting on 3s with the Crushing 2 and Vicious as well means you're going to be converting most of your hits into wounds. There are a couple of other characters in the game that have similar kind of ability. I'm thinking the Dwarf Berserker Brock Lord, who has lots of attacks to be dished out, and a few others as well. Things like vampires, obviously. And there's also the Orc named character as well, the Gakamak, that's the one. He's another one that just guarantees a pretty high number of wounds whenever he goes into combat. So there are a few individuals that can do that job, and Basusan is definitely one of them. So here, you can see that Bracky moved out the way so that the Lesser Obsidian Golems could charge into the Tortured Souls. They finish them off and turn to face the centre. This unit here actually succeed in surging them into the warriors, and you'll see the result of that in a moment. Infernok has moved up as far as he can go, and the Immortal Guard have moved up and picked up the loot token there. So, one little flaw in this plan. Infernok is actually about half an inch within the charge range of the Abyssal Archfiend, and I don't want to have to turn it round. That would be really annoying. So what I decided to do instead was leave it fully within charge range, but position my half-breeds to completely block the back of its base so that there's nowhere for the Archfiend to charge it, which means that all they can do now is charge the front of the half-breeds. That's the only unit that they've got, that it's got the option of charging. And Dravak is just hiding right behind them, presenting this facing to the Archfiend, so he can't be charged either. And successfully surges them in. They do 5 damage only, but a nice nerve roll does waver them, which is very, very nice indeed. So that's going to be 1 less unit to charge in. I believe the Berserker Braves do have a flank charge, though, on the Obsidian Golems. And Grokagamok is untouched this turn. So you can see that these have picked up the token in the middle as well. This unit that was surged in after the surge, after they bounced off in combat, they grabbed the combat. The loot token there. And let's go back there. You can see the center of the table is pretty much here. And when they bounce back, they land on it and grab it. Over here, these Immortal Guard have got that one. And we're on to turn 3. So, what is going on here? Well, these boomers, they were thinking of doing a double charge into the Immortal Guard, but they wouldn't actually fit because this guy was in the front, which could have been avoided, definitely. He could have been in the flank, but the exact way he was angled meant that it was front. So you can see we were checking on that as well because this thing's still here. So very disappointing for the Ogres there, but this unit going in there alone, the unit's already on 6 wounds, they're dash 17. So those boomers, it's going to be dicey whether they can kill them or not. And if they can't and the Immortal Guard get to hit them again, then it'll be dicey either way. So it could go either way, but it's slightly in the Ogre's favour, I think, because they're getting to hit first. And the Immortal Guard not the Immortal Guard. The half-breeds are charged because that's the only charge I allowed the Archfiend to take, and they're inspired by Dravek, so I'm quite confident that at worst they'll get wavered there. I don't expect them to die from the Archfiend. And being wavered would be okay, because I'm just using them to hold up this very dangerous flyer at the moment. And they can't fight at the moment anyway, because there's no space. So they're doing their job blocking up the rear charge on Infernock here. And Grokgamok in the front. The wavered warriors just go back a little bit, or stay where they were. And the Berserker Braves, Grokgamok's finest Braves, charge into the flank of the golems there. So this unit will probably die now because they're already on 5 wounds, as you can see, but that's okay because whatever they do after combat, they're going to be set up for pain, because if they want to face Infernock, then there's possible flank charges coming from over here with these golems. There's the gargoyles up at the top as well, so if they turn to give them a flank or even a rear, then they're going to be in a bit of toast. If they present a flank to Infernock, that's a really bad idea. And even if they don't, if they just go at some kind of funny angle to try and minimise my flank ability, then I've still got Surge. So it's going to be very difficult for them to be anything other than charged in the flank by something next turn. And here, it's just a different angle on that. I think there's more healing done on... I'm not sure if there's healing actually. There may be Bane Chant cast instead of heal this turn. So there's how the middle is looking, and at the moment I'm holding the tokens, but one of them's probably about to be stolen. Yeah. And this guy, the Boomer Sergeant, who you can see if I move out of the way, he has fired into the Dragonfire team there, but only done 2 damage. That's very, very disappointing. And here, the shooters turn round, and they've done 4 damage to Basusan, not enough to worry her yet, so she's going to keep fighting them. And she's got them to turn around now, which is like, it's kind of like the Holy Grail when it comes to Ogre shooters, but if you're fighting them in combat, it's not that great, because they still have the option to, if they eventually kill you, they can turn around on the spot afterwards. But tying them up is always fun. And look at this, the Boomers, embarrassing. They add 1 more damage onto these Immortal Guard, so that is really bad for them. And they can't roll enough, because they're not inspired, these guys, so... Not looking good there at all. 6 damage onto the half-breeds, so that's not going to be enough to waver them either. So the Archfiend has 9 attacks, I think, so 6 isn't too ridiculous there, but this is quite ridiculous, only doing 1 damage from the Boomers. How many should they be doing? Well, I think all the Ogre units have about 18 attacks, don't they? And they're on 4, so you should be getting 9 hits with the Crushing Strength, so you should probably be doing about 4 damage there, you would hope, which would put them up to 10. And then an average nerve roll would kill them. But, alas, below average, Immortal Guard are still alive to fight next turn. These guys, I thought maybe they'd get wavered as a result of this fight, but they're fine. And this unit of Lesser Obsidian Golems, they do get killed, as expected. They take a zillion wounds from Grok and his Braves, and then everyone starts bouncing off an inch in various directions, which is something that 3rd edition is going to be changing considerably. The old bouncage after combat, which is going to be interesting. Wouldn't affect this one quite as much, but the whole bouncing 1 inch after you fight and the unit survives is one that 3rd edition is actually changing. I need to do a video on the currently announced 3rd edition changes at some point, before I actually get into the meat of when it hits the shelves. So, I wonder if you can hear that ice cream van outside. So you can see how they position themselves here. These Berserker Braves, these Grokgamok's finest Braves, should I say. So they've decided to not give anyone a flank charge. So Infernock, all he has to do is shuffle sideways 1 inch and then be surged forward 1 inch, and he's in the flank. So it's not really helping them there, but it does stop this unit getting into the flank. This unit, though, can charge into the wounded warriors. There's Bracky around here as well who can charge something, and my gargoyles are just off screen here, and they have a rear charge on Grokgamok's Braves now, which probably wouldn't end well for them if they get Infernock in the flank and gargoyles in the rear. That would not be good news at all. So, turn 3 for the Abyssal Dwarfs, and look at this. So, the Immortal Guard, that only suffered 1 damage from those disastrous Boomers last time, kill them on the countercharge. Nice. So they've stolen the token now, and the Boomer Sergeant is facing the wrong way. So he wouldn't even be able to charge me if he wanted to, and he can't even shoot me now because, look at this, the Dragonfire team, just to add insult to injury, after only suffering 2 damage and not becoming wavered, the Dragonfire team turns around on the spot, just gives him a quick torching, and a taste of his own medicine, and he's actually wavered. So that flank, the one flank that I was expecting to be crushed utterly, it was just there to hold up the enemy, has now actually turned round in my favour. So a little bit of luck there. The Archfiend, it was already damaged, so the half-breeds do some more damage to it, and they waver him, which is good, even though he has Fury, because what I don't want is for him to charge into the rear of anything in my army. So with Fury, he can only counter-charge, so he's only going to be able to charge this one unit, which is good. They may die, but it's stopping him getting involved, because the rest of the battle line is looking very tasty indeed, and look at this. So you'll notice that there are just dead things all over the place. So the Immortal Guard just moved out the way a bit with their token, so the Gargoyles could land in here and rear charge Grokkagamok's Braves. Infernock shuffled an inch sideways and was surged into their flank, and all that combined a zillion wounds, and the Braves are toast. Over here, Bracky charged into Grokkagamok, did a little bit of damage but not enough to kill him. The Obsidian Golems charged into the warriors on the hill and finished them off. They were already on 5 wounds, so it was a decent chance of killing them. And it's looking really bad for the Ogres right now. That one turn, if the other flank hadn't been so disastrous for them, then this middle, you'd think maybe they could turn it around. But the fact they've lost the Boomers as well, and the Boomer Sergeants wavered in the same turn, while the centre collapses, all that combined is just really bad news. So the Ogres had one bad turn. Now the Abyssal Dwarfs have had one good turn, where things have just gone in my favour. Many of them had expected outcomes in this turn, but the one over on this flank is the one that's really swung my way. This one's gone pretty much as I expected, and here, of course, the way I positioned the Gargoyles, and the fact that I've got this long line here, and was inviting the enemy to charge the middle units in that line, meant that I was always going to have the option of getting some flanks going with my surge. So, and the Gargoyles positioned at the back as well. Very handy for them. And in this turn as well, Basuzan finishes off the shooters. So the Ogres are just dropping left and right, being massacred. There's Ogre heads that's just been chopped off, rolling all over the place. And not a fun turn, that one, for the Ogres. They don't have much left now. But the Archfiend, who's wavered, so he can only charge the half-breeds. They've got these 3 characters, and the Boomer Sergeant over there who's wavered. So, not good. So turn 4. The Ogres, can they turn this one round? Well, these guys are facing over here, so the Boomer Sergeant turns to face them, just so when he inevitably gets charged by them, it'll be in the front. The Archfiend kills the half-breeds. Does a good job there, finishes them off, but he's so damaged, and I've got all my breath attacks alive back here to go after him, so I wouldn't be confident of survival if I were him. And here you can see that Grokkagamok charges into the Golems, but only just 3 wounds. Very disappointing there, Grokkagamok. And over here, the Standard Bearer charges into the Gargoyles, and he does 1 damage and does not kill them or waver them. And Nomagorok was just sitting up there, and I can't remember exactly what he was doing, maybe healing someone or shooting, but it didn't have much effect. So, very bad for the Ogres right now. What's going to happen next? Well, the Boomer Sergeant's going to get charged. He could die. If he doesn't, he's got a decent chance of maybe finishing off the Immortal Guard there next turn. But he is in the danger zone, being charged by them. This guy, I wouldn't expect him to survive. I've got Dravak, who's got Fireball. I've got my 2 breath weapons that can both turn around and get into range of him. So he's going to get toasted alive, no doubt. I've got Infernock, who's going to charge the rear or the flank. I can't remember which it is. The rear or the flank of Grokkagamok. Golems in the front. I've got Gargoyles that can countercharge that Standard Bearer. And I've got Basuzan up here as well, who could charge Nomagorok. I've got Bracky in there as well, around here somewhere. So it's just really bad news for the Ogres right now, and I expect the next turn to be another devastating one, and it is. The Boomer Sergeant's dead. I own this flank. Bit fortunate to do so, but I'm not sure whether that would have decided the game anyway. It certainly would have helped the Ogres if they had breath weapons behind here that could have popped out in the next couple of turns and started shooting me. And all this shooting does, of course, converge on the Archfiend, and he is toast, sent back into the abyss through the cracks in the lava. And the gargoyles just do 1 damage to the standard bearer there. Doesn't make much difference at this point. And here Grokgamok is dead. He is in a golem sandwich, greater on one side, lesser on the other, but toast. And Bracky and Basusan both charge into Nomogrok, but they don't actually kill him. They only do 7 damage. That's a bit of a disappointing turn for them, but it's immaterial at this stage because the ogres only have 2 models left, and they're not going to be able to chew through what I've got. Turn 5 for the ogres. So the standard bearer is going to have another go at the gargoyles. Nomogrok's going to countercharge Bracky. See if they can kill them. Well, Bracky is wavered. Oh dear. And the gargoyles are dead. So he's just going to have to get charged by Immortal Guard and Infernock instead. And that's the end of that turn. So turn 5 for the Abyssal Dwarves. I was hoping that I would actually be tabling the opposition in this turn. But as you can see, the Lesser Obsidian Golems and Basusan combine to do a zillion wounds onto Nomogrok, but then the dreaded double 1 comes up. So Nomogrok lives to fight another day, but the standard bearer is killed quite handily by the Immortal Guard and Infernock, so there's just 1 ogre left. And it was decided basically by turn 3 and 4, it was looking so bad for the ogres that I don't think they had much chance after that point. But got to carry on for battle report purposes and to see what the ogres can take down with them. So what's accomplished? Well, you can see here how this combat got in this position because Bracky turned around and got out of the way there. Turn 6, and well, on the ogre turn 6 they didn't really do anything. Nomogrok, I don't think, inflicted any wounds on anybody, and then in Abyssal Dwarf turn 6, Nomogrok was eaten alive by the same 2 units again. They did the sufficient wounds just to have to roll the nerve check again. Didn't double 1 him, so he is dead. So, the Immortal Guard, holding the token over here that by rights they shouldn't be doing. They should have been dead. But the way the middle went, I don't think it would have turned the game completely around. And this unit of Immortal Guard here picked up the other one, and the central one is sitting happily on these guys here. So, that went incredibly well, as you can see. There is the wide shot at the end, and that's the final picture. So sometimes that's how it goes. You get 1 turn, both players, where 1 player gets a combat or 2 that are below average, like over here. Boomers should have really done more to the Immortal Guard. I wasn't expecting to win that fight. And had the Boomer Sergeant been tilted slightly more away from them and had their flank, then I'm sure they wouldn't have survived. I'm sure the Ogres would have taken this flank, had the token, then been able to push around with the breath attacks. Whether that would have been enough to deal with this, all my individuals, and the Immortal Guard, and all my breath weapons that I've got around here, I doubt. But it would have helped, definitely, and it would have stopped it being so one-sided from the end of turn 3 onwards. And in the centre, it just went well. The fact that I was able to get the hit on Grokgamok in the first turn, get him wavered, was a good start. And also when I surged in the other unit of lesser golems up here onto the hill. Succeeding with that was nice. The odds were slightly against it, but it wasn't too ridiculous, the fact that that got in there. So that was nice that the one part of that was against the odds was that they wavered the unit that was on the hill, which I think counteracts the fact that Bracky got wavered by the Tortured Souls. So those two kind of cancel each other out, because had Bracky not been wavered, he may well have been able to kill Grokgamok, who was heavily wounded at that point before he got healed again. So I think those 2 things kind of cancel out. I was able to get, with my positioning, I was able to get into the flank. I think I did the right thing ignoring the Archfiend. It was so tempting to send Basusu in there, or to send the Gargoyles chasing around after it to end up charging it, tying it up for a turn, and then dying. But the Gargoyles had a bit more ambition with them, looking down in the side of the enemy battle line, and they ended up having a rear of a unit presented to them. And Basusu was able to kill off the shooters and then get into the fight again as well. I think ignoring the Archfiend was the right thing to do, because I was chasing after much more expensive prey than just a mortar. The Ogre shooters much more valuable. So I think if we both decided to just ignore each other's flyers and go for the backfield stuff, I think I ended up with the better end of that deal. And the half-breeds, I would have liked a better, more offensive role for them, but I ended up, because I kind of miscalculated on this bad boy here, and I couldn't surge both units out of the charge range of the Archfiend, so I ended up having to just block the rear charge to him with the half-breeds. So they ended up having to fight the Archfiend, which it was okay because everything else was going well, but under other circumstances where perhaps it wasn't going so well, then maybe I would have needed them in a different role and they would have been unnecessarily tied up back there. So I'll have to think about the positioning of them in the future, and also the positioning of the Mortar, because I just had it slightly too close to my battle line, so when a flyer charges it and kills it, it then has the option to turn around and be within charge range of the back of my army. If I had it slightly further away, it would have given me another turn where I was able to ignore the Archfiend. So that's something to think about in the future as well, the positioning of that one artillery piece, if you're planning on leaving it totally unguarded like I was. And overall, some good fortune over here. And I think I'm getting a hang of the Abyssal Dwarfs now. I don't know if you saw the clock, but after a couple of turns, I'd already used up a lot of my time. I think I was down to 20 minutes at the end of turn 2, but I didn't even come close to timing out in the end. So pretty satisfied with how I'm learning the Abyssal Dwarfs. Only my 5th game with them. 3 of those games have been against Ogres now. And looking forward to giving them another try. I'm hoping to get a practice game in very, very soon with them against some Dwarves. So you can look forward to seeing that, to see how that goes. And maybe one more practice game before Clash of Kings. I want to tweak the list a bit. I'm definitely going to tweak artifacts. I'm not sure which units I might tweak. I want to try out a couple of different things before big tournament. Because I need the practice with them, basically. Not many games at all. Taking a very new army to a huge tournament like that is a bit of a risk. But we'll see if it pays off. Right, I think it's time for you to look at this beautifully photoshopped thumbnail. I can disappear out the corner of your screen now. And it's new. Look at this. New style for the thumbnails for these videos. Very, very nice and shiny. And of course, the amount of time it takes to do that is literally seconds. And those seconds, of course, are very valuable. If you feel like supporting this channel, don't forget to check out the links in the description for various fundraising sources, including Patreon. And if you were to pledge there and it reaches a certain goal, you can actually encourage me gently to create monthly or weekly live discussion shows where I'll be going over all the hot topics in the wargaming community, particularly probably Mantic products, because that's where my attention is mostly at the moment, but I'll go into other stuff as well. Hoping to play some bolt action soon, actually, so I'll probably be doing something with that in the near future. Don't forget to join my Facebook group if you want to see what's going on, if you want to post anything in there that's relevant to my current interests as well. Twitter is also down there. And let me know in the comments if you've got any thoughts on this game, thoughts on the lists involved, thoughts on the Abyssal Dwarves in general. If you've got experience with them, you want to offer some advice for a bit of a beginner, an inexperienced player of Abyssal Dwarves like me. And with that, all that remains to be said, I think, is good night out there, whatever you are.